How
How are
are
you?
you?
I'm good. I'm good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. I can hear you fine. Andrew, I'm so glad you came on live with me. This is like so exciting. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So basically, I'm just gonna talk about a little bit about myself and like what I do. So I'm a progressive political commentator. Like I like to think I am. But I'm independent. I used to work for NBC and different news stations. I didn't like how they control the narrative, so I left. And after a lot of soul searching, I kind of just came back to, and I am starting to grow and build my brand. So every night I have conversations about what's going on in the world. So last week it was the Haitian refugees. The week before that it was abortion. The week before that it was Afghanistan. But when it comes to certain topics that I'm not very well versed in, like global warming, I don't want to be one of those like influencers that sits in front of a camera and starts spewing stuff that I don't know about. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the
Right.
day, that's not my specialty. It's not my expertise. So that's why I wanted to bring you on so that you could talk to my followers and the people that view my live. And this was actually very highly requested. I had multiple followers ask me to talk about global warming, and I'm like, listen, dude, I don't know. Quite frankly, I don't know shit about global warming. Like I just don't know
Right.
that well. So yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, and just I'm just gonna have you start, and then we'll just keep the conversation flowing.
Absolutely. Again, thanks for having me. My name is Andrew Kozak. I am a meteorologist. I've been doing it now for almost 18 years, which is kind of crazy. I'm from New York City, and really, a lot of people have always, what do you want to be when you grow up? The first time I ever watched The Wizard of Oz, I was 4 years old, and I saw the tornado part, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And then once the color kicked in, I was like, I don't really care about the munchkins, the witches. I don't really care about this stuff. And it just occurred to me that the tornado part of the movie was real. That's something that could happen. And ever since then, I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be a meteorologist. So,
Oh,
yeah, it was like a dream come true to intern for the guy that I watched growing up in New York City. And then I've been in Casper, Wyoming, because you got to start in a really small place, Wichita, Kansas, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Memphis, Tennessee. And then I did a little freelancing in Austin and in Kansas City. And now I'm in Ohio. I'm in Columbus, but it's really cool because we get to do the entire state. So we cover Cleveland by the lake, Cincinnati down by the river, and everywhere in between.
uh-huh.
And I've been really fortunate to be doing what I love for, like I said, almost 18 years. And it's the dynamics change now a little bit because I don't just do local weather, but the timing of this actually comes out really good because now we're going to start to be more station scientists and climatologists delivering the message to viewers and everybody that watches and listens about climate change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yo, that's so interesting. I love your like starting story. That's like so adorable. Who knew the
It's,
Wizard of Oz was going to inspire your whole entire career?
it did. It's nuts. It's crazy.
Yeah. So okay, so you might laugh at me, but I'm fully convinced that we're going to live in like a dystopian like world in our lifetime. Please tell me I'm wrong, and if I'm not, like tell us a little bit more about like how like what global warming, like what is our world going to look like in 50 years if we keep doing what we're doing?
Well, first of all, I want to say this. It was so refreshing, and this is going to be for your viewers and for everybody that's watching. It was so refreshing for you to say, "Look, I don't want to be one of those influencers that just spews it out." Because the truth is that disinformation on both sides can be really dangerous. You know what I'm saying? And we've seen it so many times with political stuff. Somebody too far right is never going to see eye to eye with somebody too far left. And sometimes we have to kind of meet in the middle somewhere to kind of discuss and kind of start from there. So the truth is that global warming and climate change, which climate change really is the better term to use. And people may say, well, what's the difference? I've heard, and you may have heard this before, well, it used to be global warming, and now they're saying it's climate change because they want to cover themselves when it gets too cold in the wintertime. But when we have record snow, when we have record cold, that is part of the climate change problem as well, especially when we have records that are being broken year after year after year. So the first misconception is that it's not about the warming or the cooling. It's more about the fact that the extremes, that's what we're going to see more and more of. That's what we're already seeing more and more of. And those extremes are what's going to, well, cause us to have a change of life, a change of way of life. To answer your question, it is going to be extremely, extremely difficult to say, okay, are we going to live in a dystopian universe, a world 20 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now? It is very difficult to say when that breaking point is where our way of life changes, where we wake up one day and all of a sudden everything's different. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be gradual. And the scary part is that we're already seeing that gradual change now. Well, we can get into that, but there's just so many different things that we're seeing in our climate that we hadn't seen 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Okay, so I used to work for the Wildfire Safety Operations Center for PG&E in California for a year. I did communication, so I was on the field last year when we had a historic, fire season. And I think one of those main things in California is the wildfires, like one of the very main things that we're starting to see in California. But I think all over the world, there's all these, I know a portion of Iran went through a drought just very recently because of climate change. I've been hearing reports that in 20, 30 years, certain cities are going to be underwater or are going to start going underwater. Is that true? Because I've heard that San Francisco is for sure going to be underwater within 50 years.
I don't know about San Francisco itself. There are people that monitor the rising water levels. For sure, there are cities that what we know of right now, and San Francisco's on the list of where we're watching, but there are cities right now where we're seeing a real danger where it's already affecting them. Miami is one of them, and New Orleans is the other. In Miami, every time we have heavy rain, it doesn't have to be from tropical storms or hurricanes, but from heavy rain, the roads and the highways and the neighborhoods that are built right up to the coast, including those high-rise condos, they're getting water, and there's nowhere for the water to go. Our streets get flooded sometimes in heavy rain. That happens. There's no climate change with that. But in Miami, you can see, and this happened a couple of years ago, and it happened last year as well, where the water floods the road, and you're like, well, where is it coming from? It's because the ocean and the water right where the city is meeting. Where there was beach before, where there was a retaining wall before, the water is now breaching that. New Orleans, as a lot of people know, the elevation of New Orleans is actually below sea level. So they were fine with that last hurricane with Ida. They didn't take a direct hit. And they had, of course, the retaining walls and the pumps that they put in after Katrina, which were good. They didn't malfunction. They worked, which was good. They had backup power supply. But that can only do so much. So you have cities right along the coastlines, sure. On the West Coast, areas like San Francisco, even portions of San Diego down toward LA, yeah, there's a real concern. It's going to depend on how much of the ice caps continue to melt, how much of the glaciers continue to melt. And we have more and more video of people on Alaskan cruises and people on expedition trips or even fishing trips going up toward areas like Greenland and up toward the poles and seeing those the glaciers kind of melt and fall into the ocean. And these are big. There are pieces that are falling in that are melting off. And eventually, of course, they melt when they all fall into the ocean that are the size of Manhattan. So you do that over the course, the size of Manhattan, like the size of New York City. Okay. Yeah. So when you got pieces of ice that are miles and miles big, continuing to fall, eventually you're going to see some of that. It's not going to be like the movie Waterworld. I don't know if you saw the movie back in, it's an old movie now, but the epilogue or the prologue of the movie is that all the polar ice caps melted so quickly in all the world. It's not going to be like that. It is going to be gradual. 50 years, maybe. I think it's way less than that, though, for areas like Miami and New Orleans, if we're not careful and we don't do something. At this point, I hate to say it, it's irreversible to stop what's happening right now as far as the oceans go until we can really figure out how to kind of put it back in the box, if you will. But I'd say we'd have to work on at least protecting our coastlines. And I don't see a lot of cities putting too much money into that right now, unless it's an emergency. You know what I'm saying? Like they wait until after there's damage done, and then they fix it. It's like putting a Band-Aid on it instead of actually, looking for a long-term solution. So it's really concerning.
How long do you think Miami has?
Well, I'll tell you this much. Hurricane Andrew took went through Florida in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, almost 30 years ago now. And they have flooding problems that you would see anywhere from a rain event like that.
Mm-hmm.
But if Hurricane Andrew came through today, if Miami took a direct hit from a hurricane today, it would be absolutely devastating to see. Forget about the wind, forget about the tornado threat, forget about all that stuff. It's just the storm surge and the water itself and how that city handles the flow of the water. It could be potentially devastating. So it's hard to answer your question because it could be next year if they got a hurricane to make a direct hit, or it could be 20 years from now. You know what I'm saying? So it really depends on. I guess the point what I'm trying to make is that we're at the tipping point now where cities like Miami need to go ahead and come up with a plan. And there are, not to take credit away, there are very good people, climatologists, scientists, meteorologists, and emergency management that are working toward it. It's just this has become so political that it's so hard sometimes to get a majority of the public behind something that is not political. This is not voting on whether or not a topic can be taught in a school, or whether or not you want, a statue of somebody erected in your town. This is literally public safety and human life. And the fact that we're even debating about it as a nation is it's mind-boggling.
So I'm glad you brought politics up. What would you say to the people that say, well, climate always changes? Like this isn't really a big deal, because I've legitimately had a debate with a conservative on my live, and he told me, well, if global warming was real, why did Obama buy a coastal house by the beach? And I was like,
well, if global warming, or if climate change is real and there's some of it that may be irreversible, then why are you doing a live right now? Why am I going to work? Should we all hide in our holes and just, the logic there doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because we're not talking about a quick catastrophe. We're talking about something that is in motion, but has the opportunity to be at least slowed down right now and potentially reversed. I mean, I don't think we put enough emphasis on the scientists and the people that are working to see what exactly we can do. And it's not going to be the United States just doing it. It's going to be the entire world. I was, not to get political, because I do want to answer that question more directly, but I was, before I forget, really encouraged by some news report I saw nationally. I can't remember if it was yesterday or Saturday, that the world, the UN, they have the global summit going on right now.
yeah.
And some of the other countries are starting to agree with us and are going to be partners with us in limiting some of the things that we do to harm the environment. And it's a good first step. It's a really good first step. We need China involved. We need India involved. We need all of Europe involved. And it looks like we're starting to get some of at least our allies right now. And I think if we can come together as a world population to do this, that will be a good first step. But I'll tell you this much. When he says, what did the person you argued with on your live said something like, why is it man-made, or something like that, or was questioning the why we, or if we are the ones that are doing it. I will say something that a lot of media people may not say, and it's that you're absolutely right, that climate change is a natural thing. A sine wave?
Mm-hmm.
Up and down, up and down, up and down, right? That is most likely what has happened for the last millions and billions of years is that there's extremes, there's not extremes. There's ice ages, there's not ice ages. That, I will say, is solid. The problem is that in the last 60, 70 years, and especially really ramping up in the last 20 to 30 years, that sine wave isn't linear. It's going up and down, but it's going up and down with more of a projection going up. So even the lows have now, or the highs before, have now become the lows. So in other words, there is still a cyclical change that goes along with the course of the Earth. That we know. But it's the human component. It's what we are doing to kill our planet that are making the extremes higher and making everything skew toward more of a danger zone. And that's really what's difficult. One of the comments there is, can we reverse this? Plus, would it be bad to try and reverse Mother Nature? I don't think us tackling this is going to be messing with Mother Nature, because there's nobody's proposing that we inject chemicals in the air or do anything like that. What we're proposing is, and talk to any climatologist, talk to any environmentalist, we're proposing making this planet more sustainable, making our life more sustainable, harvesting wind energy. Wind energy is coming. There's no bad output from that. Solar energy. Look at the advantages that we have with solar energy. So there's so many things that we can do to do things cleaner that could naturally reverse what we've already done with coal, with pollution, with making our oceans full of garbage. All of this attributes to the bad we've done. That's messing with Mother Nature. What we've done is mess with Mother Nature. What we need to do is reverse and clean up, and that's going to kind of reset things and balance it out.
What about nuclear energy? Not a fan?
It depends. And if you want me to be 100% honest with you and your followers, I'm not that familiar with all the inner workings of it. I just know. But I will say this.
Admit that, then just start spewing some stuff that you're like, kind of half at, like, I think.
Right. I mean, I'll be honest. If nuclear, and it is something, it's actually something I probably should read up on more. But if nuclear energy, if the amount of work that goes into it and the output is cleaner, then I'm all for it. But if it's producing a lot of waste, then I'm not. So I don't know. I've got to read up on that. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm all for anything that's clean, anything that would be less harmful to the environment that we're doing now. I'm all for it.
So I had a couple of questions. There was one question someone asked me to ask you about red tides. Do you know?
Red tides, the algae.
Yeah.
It's a big problem in Florida and along the Gulf Coast. The part of the problem with that, and it's been really bad in the Caribbean as well. So it's these algae blooms that come up, they wash up on the shore. It stinks. It smells like rotting flesh. I mean, it's just plants. It's not like, there'll be little sea creatures sometimes in it, but that's something that honestly I've seen for a long time being washed up. And so I'm not sure how much that actually has to do with climate change. A lot of people do talk about it. Now, I will say that the temperature of the ocean is what creates a lot of the issues that we're seeing overall with climate change. I want to go on to that in just a little bit too. But
yeah.
So there is a little bit of a correlation between higher water temperatures and more of those red blooms washing up on shore. So there you could kind of piece it together a bit. But it's unfortunately there's just it's just a cyclical thing with the ocean and the algae blooms. That it has a little bit to do with climate change, but it's something we've seen for decades.
Okay, so it's been happening for decades, but it's kind of becoming exasperated from most likely the temperature of the ocean going up, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, and the temperature of the ocean is affecting so many things. And actually, so I work for Spectrum News. I like them. I think they're super refreshing because they don't have an agenda except to not give, like we cover the entire state. Like we cover Cleveland, we cover the entire state of Ohio. We have Spectrum News in LA. We don't have one in San Francisco, but I feel like that's something that's down the line.
Hopefully I'll start
and New York is the place.
I'm just kidding. Go on.
What'd you say?
I said maybe I'll start working there. I'm just kidding. Go on.
Hey, listen. Yeah, we'll talk after if something opens up. But what I like is their agenda is we don't want to we want to give you the political stuff you need to know. We want to give you the stories you need to know, but we're not going to cover the crime. We're not going to cover this stuff, unless it's like, something massive on a massive level. Thank you, Julie. She said she agreed about Spectrum. So we do a lot of storytelling stories. I just got a memo passed down to me that our meteorology team, not just in Ohio, we have 5 full-time in Ohio, but we have a ton in LA and New York. We're going to start doing climate change stories and stories that affect. So the stories I'm going to work on, some will be national, but some will be how Ohio is affected. And the people in New York are going to do the same thing. So let me tell you why the ocean temperature's rising, why they're rising, and why that's almost the epitome of why everything is going nuts right now and why we should be more concerned about that than anything else. So you right now have pollution, factories giving off pollution. You have Asia where they have to, we complain about wearing masks. I mean, it's funny because there are countries that well before the pandemic, we've seen pictures in Beijing, in cities like Beijing, the masks have been a part of life well before the pandemic, just because the pollution is so bad.
That's true.
You have all of this stuff. You have oceans that are people are dumping garbage in oceans. Companies are dumping, you've got the oil problem, all of this stuff. And right now what you have is the ocean temperatures that are rising very rapidly and by a couple of degrees. You might say, well, what's the difference if a water temperature is 74 versus 76 or 77? It's a huge difference when it comes to right now, when it comes to weather, when it comes to balancing things out. Think about this. You have a fish tank in your house. I have one in my basement. If the way that the temperature is set on that thermometer, and that little heater, the pH balance of the water, that's all done to make sure that when we have pet fish, that they're fine, that they can thrive. If I increase the temperature of my fish tank just a couple of degrees, those fish are going to die eventually. And that's what's happening in the water, in the ocean. So you've got animals that cannot live. Their habitats are being destroyed. You've got coral reefs that are being destroyed. You've got temperatures of the water in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, the Gulf of Mexico is an open body of water, except it's surrounded by land by quite a few, from Florida all the way down to Mexico. So that heats up a lot quicker than, let's say, the Atlantic Ocean on the other side of Florida. So you have water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico a few decades ago in the late summer, early fall, which have always been typically the peak of hurricane season, that have been in the upper 70s and low 80s. When Hurricane Ida formed, last month, we were talking about temperatures that were 85 to 88 degrees. That's bath water. You don't want to go in water like that, right? That is really, really warm. Hurricanes feed off of heat energy. So when you have a hurricane that enters a body of water in early September, 79, 80 degrees, you may get enough of different things in the atmosphere, plus the warm temperatures of the water, to get that into a category 4 or a category 5. But one thing, because it will happen, but when you have water temperatures that are 85 to 88 degrees, the chances that hurricane is going to strengthen and become a major, major storm is very high because that heat energy is there now. So now you have the water temperatures affecting the hurricanes. So then the hurricanes come on land, and they are just absolutely devastating, more so than what we've seen in the last 20, 30 years. And then that affects the inland areas. It affects areas like New York City. New York City didn't take a direct hit from Ida. That hurricane did not make landfall anywhere near New York City. It made landfall down in the Gulf of Mexico, the Louisiana coast. But by the time it got up to New York, it was so unbelievably strong that it gave New York the most rain that's ever seen. You had people dying in all, in all five boroughs. Queens, New York, you had 5 to 10 people dead because of flooding. You had just unbelievable devastation. If that hurricane had strengthened over the Gulf of Mexico and the water was 79, 80 degrees, it may not have hit land that strong. And by the time it got up to New York, it may have been just a rainstorm. So that affects so many different things. So the water temperature affects not just the ocean, not just the habitat. And by the way, when you don't have, and it affects the weather, but when you have fish populations that are dying, that's the balance of nature that we're disrupting. So somebody said before, is reversing it, messing with Mother Nature. Mother Nature's already being messed with right now. And you have the water temperatures that are so high, fish populations are dying. Then you've got the predators that feed on those fish. They're not going to have enough food. So it's a chain reaction for everything. And people really need to start realizing that.
So what do you think about the Green New Deal? Do you think that would be a step forward, or because I've heard some arguments that it's a little bit too extreme, right? Because I think there's provisions in the Green New Deal that's like heavily cuts meat, very heavily cuts meat. I know in the South, I mean, you're in Ohio, meat is a huge part of our culture.
Yeah.
Not mine. I'm in California. Like we're a little on the vegan liberal side, but
Right.
a lot of plane flights would get cut down, but tremendously. I've heard that it's a little bit extreme, but usually what happens with deals like that is that you negotiate and you talk and you come to a middle ground. So I don't think that even if it does get passed, like everything would be agreed upon by both parties. But do you think that would be like a good start, or do you think that's just like no, like we need more, or the people, do we need to start living differently? Is it like going to be a collective like society and a world effort? Like I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
No, you make a really good point. I am absolutely for something like the Green New Deal. I don't think even the people that are in the forefront of it, like AOC, the squad, they like to call them, I don't think that they even believe that everything that's in there is going to eventually happen, or at least in the short term. I think you make an excellent point. You have to start somewhere,
Yeah.
and then meet in the middle. I do think, and I don't want to get too political, but I'm the type of person too, especially talking about something like this. I don't want to say, this is my side, this is what I say, everybody else, you're just right wing,
Well, you
whatever,
have
because
to
nothing.
stay neutral too, though. Like
Right.
especially as an anchor, you do have to stay neutral because it
Yes,
might impact the way that you report news that's supposed to be,
absolutely.
partisan. So I completely understand that.
But I do want to say this. I do think that I do want to, especially right now, since this is an informal live, I want to separate myself from my job title, but also as a person, a job title, what I do on TV, but also as a person that's looked into the science, looked into the Green New Deal, and really let's talk about why that's a good start. And it's because we're not doing anything right now collectively. Sure, we're recycling. There's a lot of people that are doing some really good things, when it comes to trying to protect our planet, clean up, and doing things that are trying to help our environment. But for something like the Green New Deal, I think that it's important for us to understand that politicizing it too much turns off the people that you need to count on their votes to make it happen.
Yeah.
So while it is a political thing, trying to make it a left or a right thing is not the way to go. And I have to say this, I'm disappointed sometimes with some of the people that are for the Green New Deal that are making it that way. I don't think that they're going to get what they want 100%, but I also think that there are some things in there that are feasible for us to do now. Look, this global pandemic made us change the way that we live our lives. I'm going to say lived, but we're still in it, right?
Yeah.
Wearing a mask and being really careful and being maybe all a little bit of a germaphobe in certain ways. And for a lot of us that got the vaccine, that masked up, it was to our benefit. And this might be the new way of life for a while. Just like those of us that are, that lived through 9/11, after that, our lives change. You didn't have to be. I was in New York during that time. You didn't have to be in New York, though, for your life to change. Anytime you ever got onto a flight after 9/11, it was never the same as it was before. And we got used to it. And I think with this, it's the same thing. I think that there's going to be things that we can do that may, for some people, be a little bit out of their comfort level, but it's a good way for us to start making changes that are positive for us, positive for the human race, positive for the planet. Doing things like cutting down on meat, that should be a personal decision. Doing things like cutting down flights, things like that. Well, what are the implications of our global economy? So there's so many questions back, and I'm not saying we should, and I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying we've got to look for solutions. One of the things I saw recently was that a whole bunch of Global Alliance airline groups decided, or they decided to sign something saying in the next 10 years, 10% of their fuel is going to be it's going to be like a biodegradable, energy-friendly type of fuel. I think it should be more than 10%, but again, it's a start. So if we could just start doing things like this and chipping away at the old habits, I think that we can incorporate a lot of positive into our lives, live cleaner, help the environment, and when you do it all progressively, and show people that there are really good benefits to it, then, look, no one likes a lot of people don't like going to the gym and exercising. I can't stand it. But then if you keep forcing yourself and you go and you start seeing a little bit of result, that motivates you to continue doing it. And I think that's what we potentially could see if we all collectively come together and make some good changes.
Yeah, I had to force myself to go to the gym. I was like, oh my God, I literally had to force myself, and I saw you make a TikTok about that too. Some days going to the gym is just like a drag, so I feel that. But I think you did make a couple of interesting points. So I'm actually Middle Eastern. I'm Iranian American. I think like either like 6 or 7 when 9/11 happened. So I was a 9/11 Middle Eastern 9/11 baby. And it definitely, like, the airport, like, I've literally been in an interrogation room with my dad in like 5th grade, and they were showing us pictures of people, and they were like, who are these people? And my dad was like, I don't know.
Can't imagine.
So I'm definitely, I agree with you. We have had pivotal moments in our life, and in the world's life, in the world in general, where it's like, okay, we have to change the way that we live, right? I think right now, correct me if I'm wrong, I think maybe our carbon footprint did go a little bit lower last year, that everyone was at home. I don't think people were commuting as much. People weren't driving. Maybe if it stays this way, it'll help a little bit.
What's a perfect example of that is, and I was just talking to somebody about this earlier today. So in the news, we have access to live cameras all the time, and we can access live, So there's that famous shot from the hills looking into downtown LA, and you see all those mansions and houses.
Yeah.
I love that shot. It's a shot used in like every movie ever. That shot, they showed that shot a year before the lockdown, and LA was covered in smog, and the normal thing, the normal picture, how it looked. And then they showed it about a month into the lockdown, and it was crystal clear. And right there shows you the point that you just made. Just 1 month of reducing cars on the highways, and 1 month of people not being out as much, and it's not saying that that's what we want, everybody stay in their home, but it's just a perfect example of, look what just in one city, in one country, in one relatively small area, look what reducing our carbon footprint did in 1 month. We went from a gray, hazy, smoggy picture of LA to 1 or 2 months right into the pandemic, when most people were ordered to stay home. And it was a beautiful, beautiful picture. And it just goes to show you how quickly, and that is a positive thing, when it comes to this. As much as we've had an impact on the environment and on the earth, it's very self-healing. We're all, I'm not one of those people that I'm not this is a science thing, even though it kind of sounds very like astrology, or I can't even, a little earthy, but just like when you cut your finger or you get a scrape, it starts to heal on its own. That's exactly, we're all connected with this planet. We all come from the same microorganisms billions and billions of years ago. Or millions of years ago, I should say. We heal quickly when given the chance, and so does our planet. And if we can stop some of these emissions and stop some of the pollution and if we can make our even baby steps to convince people that this is real, we're going to see that. And I wish that people showed, I have to get that shot. And I encourage anybody watching to Google it. It's like downtown LA before and after the pandemic, or before and during the pandemic, just to show you, right there's the proof. You reduce the cars in LA and look at that one thing. Look at that one clear picture that we saw. So yes, we can heal very quickly, and Mother Nature will course correct if we give her the chance to.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's, I never thought about it that way. Like, whenever I think about global warming, I just like, so I'm 25 years old. I guess I'm like on the cusp of like, I'm like one of the last years of like being a millennial. And I just like, I was having this conversation with my father the other day, and I don't know if you have kids. That's a personal question. You don't have to share that. I don't.
No, I'm good. Not yet.
He said, no,
Someday,
I'm good.
but not yet.
I'm
No,
good.
I mean, no. I want kids, but just not right now.
Okay, yeah. So I was having a conversation with my dad, and I was like, Dad, I don't know if even having kids is like ethical. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, well, when they're like 50, what kind of a world are we going to be living in? And he was like, you're so cynical, blah blah. But I like to think of myself as a realist, you know what I mean? Like when you have a child, when you have children, you want to let them have the best life that they could possibly have. And if they're constantly living in, like, if the UV rays are way too harsh, if there's constantly fires, if there's these constant hurricanes like over and over again, the Philippines is under the water, you know what I mean? Like, I just like, I don't
Right.
like, do you have anything to say about that? I don't know. I guess I went on like a little tangent, but like,
No, I totally get what you're saying. No, and look, so you're one of the last millennials. I'm one of the first. I think I'm like born like 1 year after the millennial start. So I totally get it. I thought about this too. So I'm divorced. My ex-wife and I were thinking about kids, and then things didn't work out, and that's fine. That's what happens. I'd like to get remarried one day, and I'd like to have children one day. And I thought this is something that I've thought about before. And it's true, but there's a couple of schools of thoughts of this. First of all, my parents, so my mom is 69, my dad is 73, and they always tell me, when they were kids, there were, when with Kennedy, and people thought there was going to be a nuclear war.
yeah,
So kids during school,
Russia, yeah.
right. So kids during school, they would have like fire drills, and they'd also have like nuclear drills.
Yeah.
And I remember
Yeah.
they were saying that the people that were in their 20s and 30s back then, used to question, why should we have kids? Everybody's going to die anyway, all this stuff. And I remember being in 8th grade, and these kids from kids from college came and visited to talk about, like, hey, in a couple of years, you're going to start thinking about college if you'd like. And they were talking about the same type of thing, like, oh yeah, everybody's talking about how the world's going to end. And this was, years ago. My whole thing is, yes, there is a concern, but if people like yourself, people like me, if people of this younger generation, we're the ones that are going to be spreading the word, just like you and me are doing right now. We're the ones that are going to be spreading the word about it. And it may take more than our generation to go and fix this. So I think it's important to continue to to have children. Of course, that is a personal choice, and not everybody can have children. Not everybody wants to have children. But I do think that I don't think that this should stop anybody if they choose to make the decision that they want children. I don't think that this issue should stop them from having it, because we need future leaders, we need future scientists, and we need future kids to grow up with people that are like-minded now to instill these values and issues into their kids. I think my parents always taught me, be an honest person, don't be afraid of hard work, things like that. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with kids growing up today getting those same values, plus respect your planet, care about the planet, things like that. And to an extent, we had that too growing up. It's just more of a dire situation now than it was back then. Or I think we're more woke about it now.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are. And I think having cell phones with really good cameras has made it that way as well. We never saw the kind of tornado video, the kind of weather disaster videos that we're seeing now years ago, because not everybody had access to quickly take out their phone and take a video of it. Now everybody can take a video of everything. So we're seeing the world for what it is in real time. And it's kind of a wake up moment for a lot of us.
Yeah, no, I agree. So would you say like some of it is also like it might be fear mongering too, or do you think like all of the worries are like totally just like they're warranted?
My feeling about this is there's so much fear mongering politically on either side, right?
Right.
When it comes to so many things. So if you were to ask me, like if I was going to be interviewed for the news right now and say, okay, sorry, I just got these new dining room chairs and they are way less comfortable than I thought they were. If you were to ask me,
so sorry, if you want, just let me know when you.
No, you're good. So if you were to ask me right now, what fear mongering, here's what I would say. We've got a real problem. We've got a real issue here, but we also have a chance to slow things down and turn things around. But we cannot do it as a minority. We can only really make a meaningful impact as a society, as a nation, and globally. So let's not panic. Let's all take a deep breath. Let's look at the issues that we have. Let's look at the water temperatures around the world. Let's take a look at the severe weather, the increasing severe weather. Let's take a look at the increasing, on the other side, snowstorms, blizzards, extreme temperatures, both warm and cold, how that's affecting our food supply, how that's affecting our animals, our livestock. Global warming affects so many different things. When the climate goes, remember I was talking about the fish temperatures,
the ecosystem.
You look at the heartland of this country. There are soybean and corn supplies crops that are being destroyed every year. That drives the price up because the temperature fluctuations, or the too much rain or too little rain, is taking the balance out of all of this. So it's not time to panic. It's time to calmly and collectively look at the problem and look to the scientists for the solutions. I am. If there's one thing political I will say that may seem like I'm taking sides, it's that you also being a news person, news-minded person, I watch a little bit of everything. I like to see what CNN is saying. I like to see what Fox is saying. I like to look at everything. I mean, naturally curious person, and I'm news-minded. And to politicize this, and for right-wing media to make the scientists look like criminals, and to laugh at them. I saw one channel was literally laughing at doctors and epidemiologists who were trying to, in a press conference, make people aware of the seriousness of the pandemic. They were laughing at them. And I think that has got to stop, because the more that a good segment of the population is ingrained in them that the scientists and the climatologists and the experts and for our health, the epidemiologists and the doctors, the more that they get ingrained in that those people are not to be listened to, well, then the harder it is for the rest of us to get those people on board. We can't do this without those people. We cannot do this without everybody. And because we're so divided, especially the heartland of the country and the deep South, which is so red, and it's ridiculous that red or blue. If you told me, well, I'm a red all the way Trump supporter, well, there's a very good chance that you would think that the climate change is not man-made, and all this stuff. So we've got to be more collectively calm about it. And I think the left does themselves absolutely no justice when they hammer it in, oh my God, we're all going to die. It's not that. I think that there are true concerns. There are things that need to be fixed now, going back to what we started with, like along the coastlines and cities that are close to being underwater or in very big danger of it, especially like Miami if they get a direct hit from a hurricane. But I think that we need to just have a calm conversation. There needs to be more of this. There needs to be more of this type of thing. And every side needs to stop saying, well, I'm right, you're wrong. Listen to the other people. What I want to say to somebody that doesn't believe in man-made climate change, or somebody who believes that the meteorologists, the climatologists don't know what they're talking about, okay, you're entitled to your opinion. Tell me why. What is making you feel that way? And I would like to listen to them and then say, well, let me explain to you. I don't want to say that word. I don't want to say let me explain. I don't want to be explaining. Like, let me give you the other side of it. And let me tell you, as an expert, as a meteorologist, as somebody who's taken many courses and who studies climatology, here's why there are some issues. And I think that if we were all able to talk like that, and not just about climate, but about politics and about religion and about science, about all these things, I think that we would be a lot better. So it's difficult, but I think that if we can just get more people to calmly talk about it, I encourage everybody to Jeff Baradelli. He is the meteorologist for CBS News. He went to my high school. I've met him several times at conferences. He's a little bit older than me, really nice guy. He left TV news to do climate, to work on his PhD and be a climatologist, and now he works for several different places, but goes on CBS as their expert. So he doesn't really work for them, but it goes for the expert. And it's what he's done is calmly explain what is going on and how we can all play a small part in fixing it. So I think when you propose things like that, you give the side that you're arguing against less ammunition to go after you and get angry and irate. Sometimes people might sit down and think, okay. Or there might be something to be said about that,
So, Andrew, when I ask you these questions, I'm kind of playing devil's advocate because I do these lives every night, and there's a whole set of people that try to discredit me every single night. Like, they don't follow me, they know who I am, somehow they have my notifications on, and they're always in here, like, go back to your country, like stupid stuff like that. Anyways,
well,
so
that's just ignorance on their part.
no, but when I ask you these questions, I don't want you to think that, like, okay, well, I think this way. It's mostly like I'm reading the comments, I'm calibrating what you're saying, and I'm just kind of like weaving in what the comments are saying and kind of like having that conversation with you as well. But the reason why I'm independent is because I love the squad. I think they have revolutionized the way that politics works, especially for a woman that looks like me. But at the same time, like, I don't believe in extremism when it comes to anything. Whether it's socialism, progressivism, like, liberal, conservative. I think when you take anything to the extreme, and that's not just with politics, that's with anything, right? If you work out to the extreme, you're gonna break something. If you eat something every single day, all day, you're gonna get sick of it. It's just like anything to the extreme with anything in life, I just personally don't agree with, and that's something that I will never agree with. But one of the comments said this, and I kind of understand where this comment is coming from, is that when we look at global warming and the impacts of it, so we talked about Hurricane Ida, how the temperature of the water was hotter. It created Hurricane Ida. It really propelled Hurricane Ida to become the big storm, and what it was. Like, sorry if I sound stupid when I'm saying this, but
No. You're saying everything right.
thank you. It propelled it to be as big as it was. But when you look at who did Hurricane Ida impact, right? Predominantly, most of the people that died from Hurricane Ida were stuck in the attics, right? We're stuck in underground levels. Those underground levels are rented to people that are lower income, right? Who can't necessarily afford a skyrise or a second or
Yep.
third level in New York. And I quite literally saw, cops trying to swim underneath and try to get to
And
them.
they're illegal, by the
They're
way.
illegal, right?
So,
Absolutely illegal.
yeah.
So it goes into, like, we were talking about the ecosystem of the ocean, right? Now we're talking the ecosystem of essentially the society that we live in now, right? Like, there's a housing crisis. Housing crisis causes these, like, makeshift apartments and basements. Low income people go into those basements. Mostly,
Mhm.
I'm just assuming that most of the people that stay there are low income. Something like
Yes.
Hurricane Ida hits, which is global warming, and it directly impacts the lives. Now, it impacted everyone, right? But it directly takes the lives of mostly the people that are disadvantaged in our society. And one of the comments said that, like, well, how can you stay calm when it's quite literally killing a subset of people and directly impacting a subset of people? And I kind of get it, you know?
Yeah. I no. Well, first of all, if and here's what I'd say to that. Whenever you have a hurricane, because you have so much rotation and multiple rotations in a storm, it is absolutely possible that by the time the remnants of Ida went to New York, it could have, because there were tornadoes in Philadelphia, there were tornadoes in New Jersey, there were parts of New Jersey where there were very affluent homes that were hit. So a tornado doesn't know what neighborhood, right? So it's very possible a tornado could have hit on the Upper East Side, and a bunch of rich people in Manhattan could have had their luxury apartments destroyed, right? It's something that could have happened, right?
Right.
But what we know, but that's always a gamble. Tornadoes, you don't know until it's happening, until it starts to form, where it's going to hit. What we did know is that the rain. So let me just preface this. There is nothing that we as a society can predict to do that could prevent a tornado from hitting, or to minimize the damage of a tornado, other than if you're in the Midwest, you have storm shelters, you construct houses differently, things like that. But the real death and destruction from Ida was the rainfall and the areas that were poorly drained, had drainage issues, the areas that had all those apartments with illegal basement apartments. They were converted. They were houses of basements of houses that people converted to apartments, and they're illegal because there is no entrance besides the front entrance to get in or out. And if the walls cave in, like a lot of what happened in Queens, the walls caved in from the water, like the basement walls, and they just got filled up with water and they drowned. So right there, that's impacting that, because our infrastructure in an area like Queens is not set up to handle that kind of water. Nobody ever thought we're going to get rain like that, because we never did get rain like that. But it's not thought of. And then when global warming, or when climate change causes a storm like Ida to hit, the first people to suffer are the low income. So that's an issue. That's a socioeconomic issue, because those people, unfortunately, they were already not thought of before. And then these same people that didn't think of them also didn't think about the infrastructure. Because look, some of these basement apartments and they haven't been updated, and the walls have not been updated to handle that kind of water since they were built. And in some cases, they're over 100-year-old houses. So that's the first, just to say that. The second thing is, so how could you stay calm, right? How could you stay calm? People are dying. and I understand that what it looks like to take it as you want from people watching and people listening and looking at your typical white guy saying this, right? Because it's so easy to say, well, but let me say as an empathetic and as a sympathetic person, as somebody who has an open mind with this, if we panic, if we're not calm about it, we're going to be counterintuitive to to getting a solution in there. So I'm not saying sit back and say, let's be calm, let's just relax. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to be calm, we need to be productive, and we need to be careful how we go about this. Because being too, like you said earlier, being too extreme about it, doing a mock dictatorship and passing a Green Deal without giving everybody the chance to have their input from all sides, it's going to be counterintuitive. Nothing's going to get passed. I think we can all agree that I'd rather see some change versus zero change if it means that we're taking a slower approach. I don't think we need to. I do think we need. There is a lot of there's a lot of cause to really start to speed things up right now. But right now we're not doing nearly enough. And if we can slowly start to do enough, if that means we can slowly, get on board, get people on board, I think that's a much better. I'm looking at the long term for this, right? Because this is not something that it's not like you're gonna message me, hey, let's do a live and talk about success, right? In 2 years. No, it's not going to be like that. It's going to be Success is going to happen long after you or I are gone. But I think the best solution is to go about it in a calmer way, explaining things to people, listening to people, even from the other side, and showing proof of what's happening without the dramatics, leaving all of that out of it. And I think that that's going to give us a much better chance for a long-term solution. I do think there's probably a need to turn up the dial in areas that we know now are going to be impacted in the next 2, 5, 10 years. I think that is going to be an issue where we probably need to get more politically involved in things like that. As far as a whole, getting everybody on board with the whole global warming is happening because of us, that I think is going to be a slower, more delicate process to get people on board. But so I agree. And listen, I don't have all the answers. And that's just my personal opinion. I want to be able to say this is what the solution is. But I don't. I think that it's just because we've become so politicized, so polarized in opinions, and so quick to jump down the throats of people who disagree with us. That's such a problem right now. And my only personal solution, and I look at it like it could be something viable, is because I've seen it in my own life in trying to convince friends of mine to get vaccinated, and trying to convince friends of mine that in the beginning that this pandemic was actually real. So it's to me, I think it's something where we just have to be really careful how we go about explaining this to people that may not agree with us and have a difference of opinion with us. I think it's going to go a really long way to getting everybody on board and having a better long-term solution.
Guys, thank you so much for sticking through. Please go give Andrew a follow. Andrew, you're now my good friend. I don't care. You're now my good friend. It is very late for Andrew and late for me. So Andrew, thank you so much for your compliments. Thank you for coming on here and giving us this takes time, it takes energy, and I did not offer any monetary compensation. So thank you so much for coming on here and just spreading education. Like I sincerely appreciate it, and I appreciate you for coming on here. For anyone that doesn't know, I completely went rogue, and I just messaged Andrew and I was like, hey, like wanna go live? So thank you for responding, and thank you so much for making this live so amazing. I couldn't have done it without you.
Thank you for having me, and I'm honored, and I can't wait to do it again.
Of course, we'll do this weekly. You're gonna be seeing my face weekly.
You got it. You got it.
news. Well, Andrew, have a
Yeah.
good night, guys. Have a great night. Thank you for sticking around this long, and I will see you guys again tomorrow.
Thank you guys. Have a good night. Thanks for having me.
Bye.